Imagine watching your 10-year-old climb 264 steps to the top of the world's tallest water slide, waving at you from the platform, then watching his severed head roll past you at the bottom, because the designer thought netting would keep riders from flying off. Except he put metal poles right where their necks would hit. This is the most disturbing theme park incident's iceberg. Tier 1. Magic Carpet Ride. It's July 8th, 2021 at the National Cherry Festival in Traverse City, Michigan. Families are everywhere. Kids are screaming on rides, and the Magic Carpet Ride is swinging passengers back and forth like it's done thousands of times before. Then, everything goes wrong. The massive steel arm that holds the passenger platform starts swaying violently from side to side. Not the controlled motion it's designed for, but an uncontrollable wobble that makes the entire structure look like it might topple over. The ride operator hits the emergency stop and jumps away from the controls. But momentum doesn't work that way. The ride keeps swinging with 23 passengers trapped in their seats, screaming as the whole thing threatens to collapse onto the midway. What happens next is unexpected. 15 to 20 people rush towards the base of the ride. These aren't trained professionals or emergency responders. They're just random festival goers who grab onto the fencing and guardrails, using their combined body weight to physically hold the ride steady. For 3 minutes, these strangers work together to stabilize the swaying structure. They're essentially fighting the ride's momentum with nothing but their collective weight. And somehow, it works. The wobbling slowly dies down until the ride finally stops. But there's another problem. The safety restraints won't release. The electronic locks have failed, so staff have to manually unlock every single harness, helping riders off one by one. Miraculously, no one gets hurt. But the ride is dismantled the next morning and shipped back to its manufacturer for inspection. Monorail Disney World. Disney World's monorail system is supposed to be the future of transportation. Clean, efficient, and safe. On June 26, 1985, that reputation takes a hit when the monorail Silver arrives at the Epcot Center station with a flat tire. The staff replaces it with a backup tire and sends the train on its way. A few minutes into the journey, the backup tire also fails. But this time, the consequences are catastrophic. Without a tire to cushion the contact, the metal wheel rim starts scraping against the concrete beam. The friction creates sparks, and those sparks ignite the shredded rubber. Smoke begins filling the passenger car as the torn tire burns beneath them. The monorail operates on an elevated track 30 feet above the ground, with no emergency exits at ground level. There are no onboard fire detection systems, no evacuation plans, and no way for passengers to escape except through the vehicle itself. Panic spreads through the smoke-filled car as passengers realize they're trapped. The pilot radios for help, but every second counts when you're breathing toxic fumes in an enclosed space. 2 passengers kick out windows and force open a door to reach the roof maintenance hatch. They evacuate their car, then move to others. People are sliding down the monorail's nose onto the track beam, because that's better than suffocating. Only after this did Disney remember that fire safety was a thing. Suddenly, nitrogen-filled tires, smoke alarms, and evacuation plans became the new standard. Apparently, it took a near disaster to discover common sense. 7 people are hospitalized for smoke inhalation, while others suffer minor injuries. The rear car is completely destroyed, and the second-to-last car sustains significant damage. Disney implements new fire safety methods and starts inflating monorail tires with inert nitrogen to reduce fire risk. The Smiler Crash. You're strapped into the front row of what's supposed to be the most thrilling roller coaster in the world. 14 inversions of twisted steel designed to scramble your brain in the best possible way. The safety systems are state-of-the-art. The engineering is flawless. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, humans. June 2nd, 2015. Alton Towers is packed with people. The Smiler is running 5 trains simultaneously, cycling nearly 1,000 thrill seekers per hour through its maze of loops and corkscrews. It's engineered to disorient you, confuse you, make you question which way is up. And on this particular Tuesday morning, it's about to live up to that promise in the worst possible way. That morning, engineers detect what every safety system is built to catch. A test train stalled mid-circuit, sitting motionless on the track like a broken toy. The computers are screaming danger. Red lights flash across every screen. Warning systems lock down the entire ride. Every failsafe engages exactly as designed. The technology is doing its job perfectly. Too bad the humans aren't. Staff members stare at their control panel displays, believing the computer systems glitched. They chose to ignore the alarms without physically checking the track. Without confirming the stalled train is actually clear, they override the system, sending a fully loaded train carrying 16 passengers straight into a stalled one at 50 miles per hour. The impact crushes the front row entirely. Vicky loses one leg below the knee instantly. Leia also loses her leg. Joe, sitting behind them, suffers devastating injuries that will take months to recover from. Others endure shattered bones, internal bleeding, collapsed lungs. The worst part? The train was stuck. Passengers dangled upside down for 4.5 hours before rescuers could reach them, long enough for injuries to get a whole lot worse. When investigators finally piece together what happened, they uncover something more disturbing than mechanical failure. Systematic negligence that would make a safety inspector weep. Alton Towers had never built a clear protocol for what to do if a train stalled mid-ride. Staff training glossed over these rare but critical scenarios, leaving employees to make guesses instead of following a tested procedure. Initially, Alton Towers plays the blame game. They fire a single ride operator, painting this disaster as one person's mistake rather than their institutional failure. Convenient scapegoating. But prosecutors aren't buying it. The evidence is overwhelming. Merlin Entertainments, the parent company of Alton Towers and one of the biggest theme park operators in the world, pleads guilty to health and safety breaches, receiving a record £5 million fine. But for Vicky, now navigating life with a prosthetic limb, no amount of money can restore what she lost that day. The Smiler reopened in 2016 with upgraded brakes and emergency access points. Marketing emphasized their new safety features, as if better equipment could somehow undo a culture that prioritizes profits over human lives. The ride still operates today, spinning tourists through its 14 inversions. But the ride is a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous part of any system isn't the machinery. It's the human ego that thinks it's smarter than the safety systems designed to protect us. Tier 2. Killer whale incident at SeaWorld Orlando. Tilikum the orca weighs 12,000 pounds and has a documented history of fatal aggression. Yet on February 24, 2010, veteran trainer Don Brancho lies beside him during a post-show interaction at SeaWorld Orlando, rubbing his massive head as she's done countless times before. The Dine with Shamu show had just ended. Guests are still dining poolside, watching what they believe is a harmonious bond between human and whale. Dawn, a 16-year SeaWorld employee, knows Tilikum better than most. She's worked with him for years. Then, without warning, Tilikum grabs her. Witnesses give conflicting accounts. Some say he seized her ponytail. Others claim he grabbed her arm. The confusion comes from different vantage points, but the outcome is the same. He drags her underwater. What follows is 45 minutes of horror. Tilikum refuses to release Don's body, avoiding staff attempts to corral him with nets and food rewards. The crowd watches in stunned silence as the massive orca holds her beneath the surface. This shouldn't have surprised anyone. Internal records show SeaWorld documented over 100 incidents of orca aggression since 1988. 2 of those incidents specifically involved Tilikum. In 1991, he drowned a trainer in Canada. In 1999, a man's body was found draped over him in mysterious circumstances. Despite this history, SeaWorld continued using him in performances. They claimed to have modified protocols, but those changes were minimal. Trainers couldn't swim with him, but they were still encouraged to interact during relationship sessions on shallow platforms, exactly like the one that killed Don. The autopsy reveals the brutal reality. Don died from drowning and traumatic injuries, including a severed spinal cord, fractured ribs, and her scalp forcibly torn from her skull. SeaWorld receives a $75,000 fine for willfully exposing trainers to danger and is forced to install physical barriers between whales and staff. Tilikum continues performing until his death in 2017. Don's death brings intense scrutiny to marine parks, partly fueled by the 2013 documentary Blackfish. SeaWorld phases out theatrical orca shows by 2016, but continues housing Tilikum's largely inbred offspring. Sailing ship Columbia accident. It's Christmas Eve, 1998, at Disney's Frontierland. Hundreds of families are waiting to board the Columbia, which is a 110-foot replica sailing ship that circles Tom Sawyer Island on an underwater track. The happiest place on Earth is about to demonstrate what happens when you replace safety equipment to save a few bucks. The Columbia is coming in for docking. Cast member Christine Carpenter grabs the mooring line. Standard procedure she's done hundreds of times, except this time, she's holding nylon rope instead of hemp. Management made the switch to save money. Cost-cutting is a theme you'll see everywhere in this iceberg. In Tier 7, it's building a maze without sprinklers that becomes a furnace, killing 8 teenagers. Here's what Disney's accountants didn't understand. Hemp rope is designed to snap under extreme pressure. The Columbia comes in too fast. The captains are distracted. The nylon rope doesn't break like hemp would. Instead, it stretches tight. 10:40 a.m. The force rips the 9-pound cleat from the rotten wood. It launches into the crowd like a cannonball. Luann Dawson takes the full impact to his face, skull fractured, brain hemorrhaging. His wife, Liu Vong, gets hit too. Her jaw tears open. Blood pools on the dock. Witnesses describe seeing tissue and flesh. Anaheim police show up hours later. Disney has already pressure washed the scene. Evidence gone. The investigation reveals the full picture. Cost-cutting rope substitution. Untrained seasonal workers. Rotting infrastructure nobody bothered checking. The cleats' bolts weren't designed for that kind of tension. They never had a chance. Dawson was declared brain dead 2 days later and kept on life support for 11 hours before life support ends. Vuong faces years of reconstructive surgeries. Disney settles for $25 million. OSHA hits them with additional fines. After this, Disney rediscovers safety protocols. Ride foremen return. Emergency systems get installed. Docking procedures rewritten. Anaheim Police now stations officers on site permanently. The Columbia still operates today, now always with hemp ropes that break before metal flies into crowds. The kind of basic safety measure that only seems obvious after someone dies. La Feria roller coaster collapse. The Chimera roller coaster at Mexico's La Feria de Chapultepec has operated for 35 years across 4 continents. Known for its 3 vertical loops and speeds over 50 miles per hour. It seems like just another day of thrills on September 28, 2019. At 2:30 p.m., the last car of a 5-car train derails mid-loop. Onlookers watch in horror as the car flips upside down, slams into a support beam, and plunges 33 feet. 2 young men die instantly from severe head trauma. 2 women survive with serious injuries, while 6 others suffer shock. The real surprise is that this hadn't happened sooner. Maintenance log reveal operators knew about corroded tracks, misaligned joints, and screws that didn't fit ride specifications. Park management routinely ignored daily safety checks entirely. The ride was only barely operational, yet they kept sending people on it. The ride's manual explicitly prohibited operating with damaged track welds or loose bolts, conditions present for months without acknowledgement. The park's operating license was immediately revoked, forcing permanent closure on October 13, 2019. By 2023, demolition crews dismantled the site, replacing it with an urban park. The incident creates such fear that attendance at Mexico City's amusement park drops 30%. Chimera's remnants are shipped to Indiana Beach in the US for refurbishment and a chance at a safer second life. Hydro coaster disaster. April 2004 at Oakwood Theme Park in Wales. 16-year-old Hayley Williams prepares to ride Hydro, the park's flagship water coaster, marketed as Europe's fastest and wettest. The ride promises a massive 120-foot, 50-mile-per-hour plunge, secured only by lap bars and seat belts. There's a critical problem with the design. Neither restraint alone can prevent ejection under the ride's intense G-forces, and operators often skip physical safety checks entirely. When Hayley gets into the ride vehicle near the back, nobody notices her lap bar hasn't fully locked. Staff perform only visual inspections, not actual equipment checks. Security cameras capture everything as the boat starts its ascent. Witnesses notice something strange happening in the vehicle. Seconds later, Hayley is flung into freefall, colliding with the ride structure before hitting the plunge pool. Bystanders pull her limp body from the water, but resuscitation efforts fail. She dies of internal injuries at the hospital. A mechanical engineer later demonstrates he can wriggle out of Hayley's seat even with the lap bar down and locked, calling the safety design unacceptable. Staff training had lasted just 20 minutes, and operators admit they couldn't physically reach all restraints to check them. CCTV proves checks were superficial at best. In 2008, the park received a £250,000 fine, but Hayley's family calls the penalties inadequate. Hydro reopens with over-the-shoulder harnesses months after her death. No criminal charges follow, with the coroner citing insufficient evidence for gross negligence. The ride operates for 21 more years under a different name. Alpine slide incident. Action Park in New Jersey was notorious for dangerous attractions, but the Alpine slide was especially deadly. This 2,700-foot concrete, fiberglass, and asbestos track snaked down a steep mountainside with sleds controlled by a brake lever that offered two speeds: agonizingly slow or death trap. The sleds were often broken, making the brake system unreliable. Staff would joke about the ride's dangers, but guests in bathing suits rarely received warnings beyond a vague sign about riding at their own risk. On July 8, 1980, 19-year-old George Larson Jr. boards a sled for what will be his final ride. He doesn't know the brake is broken. Seconds after leaving the start point, his vehicle careens off the track, hurling him 25 feet into rocks head first. He dies 8 days later from his injuries. Park owner Gene Mulvihill immediately spins the narrative, claiming George was actually an employee riding at night in the rain, absolving Action Park of liability. None of it is true. George had been working at an adjacent ski resort months earlier, but wasn't employed by the park that summer. The accident occurred in daylight with no rain. State regulators never investigate. Gene is such an influential figure that nobody wants to challenge him. A fabricated insurance scheme using a Cayman Island shell company lets him dodge lawsuits. George's family eventually settles for $100,000, forced into silence by legal threats. The slide remains open for years, becoming an insurance nightmare. Riders continue crashing into walls, losing teeth, or breaking bones. In 1984 and 1985 alone, there are 14 fractures and 26 head injuries reported. Gene's team dismisses injuries as rider error, while quietly repainting pool bottoms to spot drowned bodies faster. By the time Action Park closed in 1996, 6 people had died across its attractions. Not a single executive faces prison time. Black Sunday at Kings Island. June 9th, 1991 becomes known as Black Sunday at Kings Island Amusement Park. 22-year-old Timothy Benning leans toward an Oktoberfest beer garden pond to splash his friend. He's about to make the most fatal error of his young life. The water had been electrified by a faulty submerged pump with exposed wiring. As soon as his hand grazes the surface, the shock knocks him unconscious. He falls face down into the shallow water. When his friend and a park security guard jump in to save him, both are electrocuted. Witnesses watch as CPR fails. Both rescuers die, though Timothy somehow survives with severe burns. The pumps lacked a ground fault circuit breaker, a $20 fix that could have prevented 2 deaths. But Kings Island isn't finished. Just 1 hour later, 32-year-old Candy Taylor boards another ride, the Flight Commander, alone. The ride's open-air pods spin riders 70 feet high using joystick controls. Suddenly, Taylor's capsule rolls sharply left. When the pod inverts, she slips through a gap between the seat divider and restraint, falling head first onto concrete. Her blood alcohol content measures 0.30%, triple Ohio's driving limit. Her limp body simply slides past the restraints, exposing a fatal design flaw. By midnight, helicopters have airlifted 3 bodies from the park. OSHA fines Kings Island $23,500 for electrical violations, while Flight Commander reopens in 1992 with modified restraints. Neither incident triggers permanent closures until public backlash becomes impossible to ignore. Tier 3. Roger Rabbit Cartoon Spin Accident. September 22nd, 2000 at Disneyland. 4-year-old Brandon Zucker sits beside his mother and brother in one of the colorful taxis that make up Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. The ride spins guests through a slapstick cartoon world with bright colors, dancing fire hydrants, and a cab named Lenny that riders can whirl like a teacup. As the car jerks sideways during a typical spin, Brandon slips out of the open-sided vehicle because of a failed lap bar later found to have malfunctioned. He falls under the following cab, which drags him 10 feet before stopping. Witnesses describe his father screaming for help as the ride continues moving. Brandon is pinned for roughly 10 minutes, crushing his pelvis, collapsing a lung, and cutting off oxygen to his brain. Paramedics restore his pulse, but irreversible brain damage leaves him unable to walk or speak. State investigators blame Disney for seating him near the open entryway and failing to secure the lap bar. The family lawsuit settles in 2002, funding lifelong care but requiring no admission of fault. Disney adds sensor-equipped bumpers and automatic doors. Brandon's body never recovers. He endures years of feeding tubes, infections, and hospital stays. His scoliosis curves his spine, finally restricting his breathing. On January 26, 2009, at age 13, he dies in his mother's arms. The coroner links his death directly to injuries from the ride. Disney's post-accident statement expresses sympathy. but internal ride cameras hadn't captured the incident, and employees initially claimed proper procedures were followed. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad derailment. September 5th, 2003, at Disneyland. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad opens as usual with hundreds of guests enjoying the Wild West themed attraction. 3 days earlier, Train 2 had been serviced to ensure maximum safety and upkeep. But engineers overlooked something critical. 2 bolts securing the left guide wheel assembly weren't properly tightened, and a safety wire meant to lock them in place was missing. As the train climbs a tunnel incline around 11:20 a.m., that loose assembly detaches. The train's rear axle jams, forcing its front downward while the back slams upward into the tunnel ceiling. The force rips the tow bar connecting it to the first passenger car, which then rockets into the derailed train's undercarriage. Marcelo Torres, seated in the front row, gets crushed by the collision. His ribs are fractured, his lungs lacerated, and his blood loss catastrophic. 10 others sustain injuries ranging from broken bones to loss of consciousness. Anaheim firefighters arrive within minutes but face a dangerous rescue mission. The wreckage is lodged at a steep angle, requiring stabilization equipment to safely extract trapped passengers. Some survivors flee on foot, while others remain pinned for nearly an hour. Park staff later admitted they heard unusual noises from Train 2 during earlier cycles, but assumed everything was fine because of the recent service, deciding not to halt operations. Torres' death marks Disneyland's first fatal ride accident since 1998. His family settles a lawsuit alleging cost-cutting had compromised safety, though Disney denies all allegations of systemic neglect. Girl flung from Chinese amusement park ride. The mobile footage starts with laughter. Teenagers are strapped into spinning seats at a park's travel through space ride. 13 seconds in, the footage takes a horrifying turn. A 13-year-old girl slipped through a broken seatbelt, her body flinging through the air during the ride's 360-degree rotation. She slams into iron railings below as other riders scream. The attraction, designed to flip riders upside down at high speeds, relied on 2 safeguards, a waist seatbelt and an overhead safety bar. Both fail catastrophically. Investigators find the belt snapped mid-rotation while the bar left a 7-inch gap. Park staff hadn't noticed the problem during opening hours. The video spreads rapidly on Chinese social media, freeze-framing the moment the girl's limp body hits the ground. When state media airs the clip, the park can no longer escape accountability. Officials revealed the ride had passed a December 2016 safety inspection, though records show no updates since 2013. As compensation, her parents, grieving their only child, accept 870,000 yuan, or $126,700 within 48 hours. Authorities quickly shut down the park, suspending all travel through space rides nationwide, and forcing the manufacturer to impose emergency checks. This was the third major incident since 2013 involving thrown riders and faulty mechanics. Comments flood social media. 870,000 for a life? How much does that park make in a month? Ride of Steel veteran tragedy. June 2011 at Six Flags Darien Lake near Buffalo, New York. 29-year-old James Hackemer visits the park with his family. He's an Iraq war veteran who lost both legs in a 2008 roadside bomb explosion. The Ride of Steel's entrance sign clearly requires riders to have 2 legs, but James walks right past it. Employees even direct him to the disability access exit. This 208-foot hypercoaster hits 73 miles per hour, with only lap bars and seat belts as restraints. James' nephew lifts him into the front row seat. 3 attendants see everything but load the ride without promptly checking restraints. As the train crests a 150-foot hill at 70 miles per hour, wind rips James' baseball cap away. Security footage shows him reaching upward, his torso lifting from the seat. The physics of his missing lower body prove fatal. Without legs to anchor against the lap bar, centrifugal forces eject him mid-drop. He strikes the track structure before landing 150 feet below. Screaming passengers return to the platform without him. His empty seat still has the engaged safety locks. Workers find James's dog tags beside his lifeless body near the track's east curve. Park staff violated explicit rules by permitting a double amputee to board, especially since training manuals and entrance signage had prohibited riders without full leg function, since a 2004 fatality on the same coaster model. James's children, ages 3 and 4, waited at the park hotel during the incident. His nephew, seated beside him, describes watching his uncle fly from the car during the descent. The park remains open as crews power wash blood from the track. Tier 4. The Grandma and Kid Disaster. August 11th, 1996, at Indiana's Old Indiana Fun Park. A miniature train carries families around the property on what should be a gentle, safe ride. As the train rounds a set of curves, it jumps the track at speeds far beyond the 12-mile-per-hour safety limit. 57-year-old Nancy Jones is killed instantly. Her 4-year-old granddaughter, Emily Hunt, is crushed beneath the cars, leaving her paralyzed from the chest down. The train operator claims to have slammed the brakes before the curve, but inspectors find a cascade of failures. The brake systems are disconnected. Anti-derailment devices are missing. The speedometer is shattered. The track itself is littered with debris from previous breakdowns. Most shockingly, state records show the train had derailed 79 times in the 2 months before the fatal crash, sometimes 15 times daily. It somehow passed 2 inspections by an inspector who later admits he lacked proper qualifications. Owners acknowledge the negligence, but deny prior knowledge of the ride's condition, despite park logs documenting chronic mechanical issues. The park closes months later, its assets auctioned to pay $1.2 million in debts. Emily Hunt's injuries require a tracheotomy and lifelong respiratory care. Her case motivates the creation of Indiana's 1997 Emily's Law, mandating stricter ride inspections and increased liability insurance. The family receives $1.5 million while owners avoid criminal charges through bankruptcy. Remnants of the park's log flume now gather dust in a Pennsylvania storage yard while the site becomes a hop farm. Fall from the haunted mine drop. September 5th, 2021 at Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park in Colorado. 6-year-old Wangel Estefanos boards the haunted mine drop ride, a 110 free fall attraction where riders plummet down a pitch black shaft. The ride requires 2 seatbelts per passenger, both manually secured by operators before each descent. Surveillance footage shows Wangel sitting on the top of both seatbelts in her seat, which had been left buckled from the previous ride. Despite a control panel alerting operators to a restraint error on her seat, they misinterpret the warning and believe the system is malfunctioning. Instead of physically checking her belts, they reset the system, a move investigators later call a critical failure. The ride dispatches as expected. As the platform drops, Wangel, unrestrained, is ejected from the train. She falls the full shaft height, striking the concrete below. The coroner confirms her death resulted from multiple blunt force injuries. A state investigation reveals operators inconsistently followed protocols, often allowing guests to buckle themselves despite manuals mandating staff handle all restraints. Training lacked emphasis on ride risks, and the manual offered no guidance for troubleshooting error codes. The control panel's alarm specifically flagged Wangel's seat, but operators bypassed it through resets without understanding the underlying issue. No criminal charges are filed, sparking outrage from Wangel's family, who calls the decision a failure of accountability. The park reopens the ride as Crystal Tower, with enclosed seats, 3-point retractable restraints, and redesigned operator panels. Perilous Plunge. September 21st, 2001 at Knott's Berry Farm. Lori Mason Larez, a 40-year-old mother of 5, boards the Perilous Plunge during a private event. The ride's centerpiece is a 115-foot near-vertical drop, promising a 50-mile-per-hour thrill, secured only by a lap bar and waist seatbelt. Other riders notice Lori, who weighs 292 pounds, struggle to fasten her seatbelt. Her 12-year-old daughter has to tighten it for her. Staff fail to verify the restraint is correctly fastened. The boat climbs 121 feet before plunging. Lori is ejected mid-drop. Her abdomen measures 58 inches, 8 inches wider than the 50-inch seatbelt. The lap bar, designed for an average 175-pound rider, can't secure her frame. As gravitational forces pull her upward, she strikes metal scaffolding, fracturing her skull and severing her leg before landing in the water below. Paramedics pronounce her dead within an hour. Investigators find the restraints inadequate, even for average-sized riders, citing lack of operator training and clear weight guidelines. Despite warnings in the ride's manual about proper restraint fit, no posted restrictions existed. Internal scrapes on Lori's thigh suggest the seatbelt had been fastened below her abdomen, leaving her torso unsecured. Knott's temporarily closes the ride, retrofitting it with fighter jet-style 4-point harnesses. A wrongful death lawsuit leads to a confidential settlement, though the park never admits fault. Perilous Plunge reopens 8 months later, but closes permanently in 2012, partly because riders no longer feel safe. Terminal velocity fall. July 30th, 2010, an extreme world in Wisconsin Dells. A Florida family is on vacation when 12-year-old Tegan Marty steps onto the terminal velocity ride. a free-fall experience promising adrenaline seekers a 100-foot drop into a safety net suspended over airbags. Riders ascend in a cage to 140 feet, where they're lowered through a trap door in a harness, then released mid-air for a 5-second plunge. The net's elevation relies on 2 operators, one at the top to trigger the release, and another on the ground to confirm the net's position. Ride operator Charles Carnell releases Tegan before the net is raised. 140 feet below, the ground operator is still refilling airbags meant to lift the net. Charles pulls the ripcord without checking. With no net to break her fall, Tegan plummets directly onto concrete. Her father's camera captures the moment she strikes the ground. Lips blue, skin gray, blood pooling from her nose and ears. Miraculously, Tegan survives, but sustains life-altering injuries. 10 spinal fractures, a shattered pelvis, brain swelling, and partial paralysis. Emergency airlifting reveals her spinal cord was stretched, not severed, offering faint hope for mobility. Surgeons fuse her spine, but she requires a breathing tube and communicates only through blinks initially. With no mechanical defect to blame, Charles is charged with felony reckless injury, yet returns to work at the park within weeks while awaiting trial. The Marty family settles with Extreme World, whose owners face foreclosure days after the incident. Tegan, then 13, leaves rehabilitation 3 months later in a wheelchair, still uncertain if she'll ever walk again. Space Journey Tragedy. June 10 at Shenzhen's OCT East Theme Park in southern China. Visitors flock to experience the Space Journey, a high-speed simulator promising the adrenaline of a rocket launch through spinning cabins and 2 Gs of acceleration. 8 days earlier, technicians had stamped the ride as safe and impressively lifelike. The attraction works by rotating 11 4-person cabins on a central point, mimicking real-life spacecraft maneuvers. At 4:45 p.m. on June 29th, halfway through a 5-minute cycle, witnesses report a sudden power cut, followed by an explosion. A critical screw bolt fails, causing one cabin to break away. The detached compartment collides with others mid-air before plummeting 50 feet, slamming riders into concrete. Safety belts snap under the force, ejecting passengers. Survivors and onlookers cope with the burning smell, screams, and sight of bodies pinned under debris. Some people fall onto railings, others onto the ground. Some die instantly while hanging dead in their seats. First responders take 20 minutes to reach some victims, while park staff scramble to shut down the ride. 6 people die instantly or en route to hospitals. 10 others suffer severe injuries, including crushed limbs and head trauma. Investigators revealed the bolt had gone undetected during routine checks, hidden behind layers of inaccessible machinery. Though the ride passed its most recent inspection, maintenance teams couldn't physically examine the component without disassembling the entire structure, a clear design flaw. The incident triggers nationwide safety overhauls, but for the families of the dead, reforms come too late. Tier 5. Raging River Drowning. July 3rd, 2021, at Adventureland Park, Iowa. The Raging River ride has been advertised as a family-friendly rapids attraction since 1983, with 6-person rafts navigating a concrete trough filled with circulating water. Mechanical pump failures cause water levels to rise abnormally, creating turbulent currents that destabilizes rafts. The Jaramillo family is caught in the chaos as their 1,700-pound raft enters a curved section. Water floods the raft, scraping its deflated air buoys against the route's edges. The raft repeatedly collides with concrete walls before flipping upside down, trapping 11-year-old Michael and 15-year-old David Jr. beneath the water in their seatbelts. Their parents and 2 other children escape, but the submerged raft is invisible to ride operators stationed at the ride's endpoint. Park staff activate an emergency stop designed to drain the trough within seconds, but systems malfunction, leaving water stagnant. Bystanders and off-duty emergency workers struggle for over 5 minutes to lift the raft while the boys remain submerged underneath. The ride is so far from the entrance that responders must sprint 200 to 300 yards to reach the scene. Michael dies the next day from drowning injuries, while David Jr. survives a month-long medically induced coma with permanent neurological damage. State investigators identify 17 safety violations, including untested drainage systems and unreported raft defects from earlier that day. Internal records show maintenance crews had repaired the same raft's air bladders hours before the tragedy. The ride permanently closes in 2023 and remains central to an ongoing wrongful death lawsuit alleging systemic negligence. The Scream. May 1st, 2015. Grand opening at Zhejiang Pingyang Amusement Park. Crowds gather around a towering 10-meter booster ride called the Scream, a spinning contraption designed to launch riders skyward at breathtaking speeds. The marketing promised thrills. What it delivered was death. At exactly 12:05 p.m., 5 eager passengers climb aboard the brand new attraction. The ride operator reaches for the manual lever that controls the exposed electric motor. This is the moment when everything goes catastrophically wrong. The machine lurches to life before the safety harnesses click into place. 5 people are suddenly airborne, catapulted more than 3 meters into the sky with nothing but gravity waiting below. 2 victims, including an 18-year-old boy, slam into the concrete with fatal impact. 3 others crumple nearby, bones shattered, organs failing. Blood pools around the ride's base as horrified onlookers pull out their phones to film the chaos. The attraction had operated for exactly 5 minutes before becoming a crime scene. Investigators uncover a web of criminal negligence that makes safety experts sick. The ride lacked basic sensors to detect unlocked restraints. No programmed safety cycles existed. No fail-safes prevented operator error. Unlike legitimate booster rides with hydraulic restraints and automatic verification systems, the Scream relied on flimsy, over-the-shoulders buckles and human judgment. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. The entire park was operating without permits. The ride itself was rumored to come from an unlicensed factory in Henan province, a region notorious for cutting corners and ignoring international safety standards. Staff received zero training on the malfunction-prone equipment they were expected to operate. Witnesses reported that operators may have started the ride while passengers were still buckling their safety belts. The timeline supports this theory. The mechanical activation happened too quickly for proper safety checks. Within hours, authorities shut down the park completely and detained the owner on criminal charges. By 2018, the site was demolished entirely, leaving only empty ground where screams once echoed. The manufacturers, they continued advertising similar rides on Alibaba and Facebook as if nothing had happened. The Fujin Raijin 2 disaster. Osaka, Japan, May 5th, 2007. Children's Day brings families flocking to Expo Land, where the Fujin Raijin 2 roller coaster has been thrilling guests for 15 years. The stand-up coaster loads 20 passengers for what seems like another routine ride through its twisting steel track. 19-year-old Yoshino Kogahara settles into the front row, completely unaware that a crucial component beneath her feet is about to fail catastrophically. As the train crests its second hill, a sharp crack echoes from car 2. The left wheel axle, untouched since the coaster's 1992 installation, finally surrenders to metal fatigue after years of stress cycles. The derailed car tilts 45 degrees at full speed. Yoshino's headrest slams into a maintenance catwalk at 15 miles per hour. Her head becomes pinned between the guardrail and her seat as the train drags her body over 300 yards, leaving a gruesome trail of blood along the track. She dies instantly while still trapped in the mangled car. 18 other passengers suffer fractures and whiplash as the coaster finally screeches to a halt, Yoshino's body still lodged in the twisted metal. The investigation reveals systemic maintenance failures that would make any engineer weep. Expo Land had skipped mandatory annual inspections, opting instead to glue worn parts rather than replace them. The axle's safety factor measured a pathetic 1.6 to 2.8, far below the industry standard of 10, leaving no margin for error. Park staff admitted they hadn't disassembled the ride since 2006, claiming lack of workspace as an excuse. This was Japan's first fatal amusement park accident, and it marked the beginning of the end for Expo Land. Within months, the park shuttered permanently. Nationwide inspections flagged 15 other coasters with similar risks, prompting stricter laws and costly safety tests that forced smaller parks to close forever. Luna Park Ghost Train Fire. Sydney, Australia, June 9th, 1979. The Luna Park ghost train has been scaring visitors since 1935. Its timber walls and black-painted ceilings creating a disorienting maze designed for harmless thrills. Tonight, it becomes a death trap. Fire inspectors had flagged serious risks 2 years earlier. No sprinklers, obscured exits, flammable materials everywhere. But deadlines for upgrades kept getting extended. By this Saturday night, nothing had changed. At 10:15 p.m., 4 12-year-olds from Waverly College boarded the attraction alongside a father with his 2 young sons. Staff noticed smoke seeping from the ride, but dismiss it as part of the show's special effects. The usual attendant isn't inside to verify this assumption. Within minutes, flames erupt throughout the structure. Panicked riders kick through walls, desperate to escape. But emergency exits remain unmarked and hidden. Thick, toxic smoke fills the tunnels faster than anyone anticipated. Firefighters arriving on scene find the entire structure engulfed in flames so intense they can't attempt rescue. Hours later, when the fire finally subsides, 7 bodies are recovered. Charred remains clustered together where a father died shielding his 2 sons, alongside 4 teenagers. Investigators find no sprinklers, faulty wiring, or clear ignition source. There was speculation of a discarded cigarette being the culprit, but management's cost-cutting neglect seems the more likely cause. Some witnesses report smelling kerosene and overhearing motorcycle gang members discussing arson, claims ignored in the initial probe. Police closed the case within hours, ruling it as an electrical fault despite zero evidence supporting this conclusion. Decades later, investigations would expose alleged cover-ups to protect crime boss Abe Saffron, who was linked to land deals involving the park. The officer in charge of the investigation was later revealed to be highly corrupt. With evidence suppressed and witnesses threatened, no criminal charges were ever filed. Tier 6. Dreamworld's Thunder River Rapids, Gold Coast, Australia, October 25th, 2016. Dreamworld's Thunder River Rapids has been a family favorite since 1986, using conveyor belts to lift 6-person rafts through shallow water channels. The ride depends on 2 water pumps maintaining critical flow levels. At 2 p.m., pump number 2 fails, draining water from the channel. A vacant raft becomes jammed on exposed support rails near the conveyor end. Operators, distracted by repeated pump alarms, fail to notice the obstruction. 50 seconds later, a second raft carrying 2 families reaches the malfunction zone. With insufficient water to float freely, it collides with the stranded vessel. The still-moving conveyor belt forces both rafts into a vertical position, ejecting 4 adults into the machinery below. The sounds are horrific, screaming and crushing as the conveyor tries to drag victims into its mechanics. One woman becomes wedged between the raft and the guardrail. Another is trapped in the conveyor slats. 2 children in the raft center cling to safety as water continues draining around them. 4 people die in Australia's deadliest theme park tragedy, crushed and drowned as their children watch helplessly. The problems had been building for years. The failed pump had tripped 3 times in previous days, with staff simply resetting it rather than investigating the root cause. No automatic water level sensors existed despite a 2014 recommendation for a $3,000 retrofit. The conveyor was poorly designed, with modified slat spacing from the 1990s creating dangerous gaps for passengers to fall through. Operators received just 90 minutes of training, with one admitting they didn't know how the emergency stop worked. Dreamworld closed for 6 weeks amid public outcry, ultimately demolishing the ride and facing a record $3.6 million fine. Six Flags Batman, Georgia, 2008. The Batman roller coaster at Six Flags over Georgia is an engineering marvel. Inverted steel track looping riders through 5 inversions at speeds of up to 50 miles per hour. For 17-year-old Asia Ferguson, it's the whole reason he wanted to visit the park with his church group. On June 28th, Asia finally gets his chance to ride with friends. During the coaster's signature 84.5-foot drop, his hat flies off. When the ride ends, he makes a fatal decision. He's going to retrieve it. Asia leaps over 2 6-foot security fences clearly marked with danger and off-limit signs. He cuts through a restricted maintenance zone and finds his hat near the ride's lowest clearance point. The roller coaster is still operating at full speed. As the 50-mile-per-hour train passes by, banking into a turn, it instantly severs Asia's head from his body. The deceleration brakes don't activate because sensors only detect obstructions on the track, not below it. First responders find the teenager's body in the restricted area while the ride continues its cycles until traumatized guests alert operators to what happened. Six Flags temporarily closes the ride for 48 hours after federal inspections conclude. Park officials emphasize that Asia ignored multiple physical and visual warnings, while witnesses insist he was simply chasing his lost hat. The Batman ride had previously killed the groundskeeper in 2002 when a passenger's dangling leg struck his head. Both victims died in zones where engineering failsafes don't monitor, creating a sinister pattern of preventable deaths. Tier 7. Six Flags Haunted Castle Inferno, May 11, 1984. Six Flags Great Adventures Haunted Castle attracts teenagers looking for thrills. The maze-like attraction consists of 17 interconnected trailers lined with foam-padded walls and wooden partitions. Strobe lights, tight corridors, and live actors create an intentionally disorienting experience. The temporary structure operates in a legal gray area, avoiding fire codes requiring sprinklers, smoke detectors, or clear exit routes. Around 6:30 p.m., a 14-year-old visitor ignites foam padding with a lighter while guiding a younger companion through the darkened maze. Flames spread rapidly across polyurethane fabrics and plywood, filling corridors with toxic smoke. Employees initially dismissed shouts of fire as part of the scare act. Within minutes, the trailers become an inferno. 30 patrons scramble through pitch-black passages, some still mistaking smoke for special effects until it's too late. 8 teenagers aged 15 to 19 collapse near an exit obscured by the maze's intentionally chaotic layout. Their bodies are found with faces pressed against air vents in a final, desperate bid for oxygen. Investigators revealed that the haunted castle had ignored 5 years of consultants' warnings about fire risks. Management rejected safety upgrades to cut costs, relying on temporary status to bypass inspections. Prosecutors charged Six Flags and parent company Bali with aggravated manslaughter. A jury acquits them, shifting blame to lack of local enforcement. New Jersey responds by mandating sprinklers, smoke detectors, and illuminated exits in all disorienting attractions. Standards later adopted nationally. But for the families of 8 dead teenagers, the changes come too late. Disney's Matterhorn. Disneyland's Matterhorn bobsleds have been a park staple since 1959, taking riders on a thrilling journey through a replica of the Swiss Alps. The attraction's reputation for safety made what happened on January 3rd, 1984, all the more shocking. Dolly Regina Young boards the ride with friends for what should be a magical experience. Midway through the descent, something goes catastrophically wrong. Witnesses in a passing Skyway gondola watch in horror as Dolly tumbles from her bobsled onto the tracks below, striking her head and back with sickening force. Seconds later, an oncoming bobsled traveling 20 miles per hour collides with her torso and head, killing her instantly. The impact is so severe that the sled derails, trapping her body beneath the wreckage. The investigation focuses on the ride's lap belt, secured by friction fasteners. Dolly's belt lies unfastened on her empty seat, despite Disney's insistence that employees check restraints twice before dispatch. Anaheim police find no evidence of mechanical failure, but cannot determine whether Dolly unbuckled herself or if the belt was improperly secured. Disney reopens the Matterhorn the next day, calling it safe after internal checks. But behind the scenes, the company quietly replaces friction clasps with car-style buckles months later, a system still used today. Dolly's husband files a $5 million wrongful death lawsuit. Disney settles out of court in 1988, with terms remaining sealed to this day. What makes this tragedy even more disturbing is its eerie parallel to another Matterhorn death almost exactly 20 years earlier. In 1964, a teenager stood mid-ride and died in a disturbingly similar way. Both tragedies hinged on unfastened restraints, yet Disney maintained its sterling safety reputation while quietly altering equipment. The case underscored Disney's self-regulated safety protocols, as federal oversight of theme parks had been stripped away in 1982. The company investigated itself, cleared itself, and moved on. West Edmonton Mall's Mindbender. The Mindbender at West Edmonton's Mall's Galaxyland promised to be one of the world's safest indoor roller coasters. 3 vertical loops and a twisting track contained within a climate-controlled comfort. What could go wrong? On June 14, 1986, operators noticed unusual noises from the train cars. They shut down the ride briefly for inspection, but maintenance crews find nothing obvious. The green light is given to resume operation. Just minutes after reopening, the 4th car of a 16-passenger train derails midway through the final loop. The detached car, traveling roughly 60 miles per hour, scrapes along the track as its lap bars, the only restraint system, fail to secure riders properly. The runaway car collides with a concrete pillar, catapulting 4 passengers onto the mall's concrete floor 25 feet below. 3 die instantly from the impact. The 4th passenger survives only because they land in a hidden crevice, sustaining shattered legs, a crushed shoulder, and broken ribs. The remaining 12 riders hang upside down in the mangled train for 20 agonizing minutes before rescue teams can extract them. Shoppers below watch in horror as blood drips from the twisted wreckage onto the mall floor. Investigators trace the disaster to 4 failed cap screws in the 4th car's wheel assembly, flaws attributed to design oversights and inadequate maintenance. The ride's German manufacturer had installed similar coasters globally, but none with this fatal defect. Alberta officials mandate immediate changes. Trains are shortened to 3 cars, seat belts are added, and anti-rollback systems are installed. The Mindbender reopens in 1987, but the scars remain. What haunts survivors most is the mall's response, or lack thereof. The lone survivor, who still battles chronic pain decades later, has repeatedly asked for a public plaque or bench to commemorate the dead. The mall's response? They offered only a private wall plaque in an office where the public would never see it. 20 years after the disaster, there was no memorial service, no public acknowledgement. The 3 victims were forgotten by everyone except their families, and the survivor who carries their memory. Schlitterbahn's Verrückt, the world's deadliest slide. At 170 feet tall, Verrückt at Schlitterbahn, Kansas City was the world's tallest water slide. Riders climbed 264 steps to board rafts that plummeted down a chute before soaring over a crest designed to create maximum airtime. Those who survived described an unbelievable rush, but the ride had a fatal design flaw hidden in plain sight. On August 7, 2016, 10-year-old Caleb Schwab sits in the front of a raft with 2 adult women behind him. Their combined weight of 546 pounds falls just below the 550-pound limit, but the uneven distribution destabilizes everything. As the raft crests the second hill, the front lifts off, catapulting Caleb into the overhead netting designed to keep riders safe. His head strikes a metal support pole, decapitating him instantly. The slide's designer, Jeffrey Henry, was a high school dropout with no technical or engineering credentials, yet he controlled key decisions for Verrückt's construction. During testing, sandbags regularly flew off rafts, prompting the addition of netting and poles that ironically became lethal hazards. Despite prior injuries and a grand jury indictment calling the design reckless, Verrückt operated for 2 years without rigid restraints or mechanisms to prevent airborne rafts. State audits after Caleb's death revealed 147 safety violations across 11 rides at Schlitterbahn, including incomplete training manuals and unreplaced mechanical parts. Charges against the slide's co-owner and designer were dismissed in 2019, when a judge ruled prosecutors used improper evidence. Caleb's family settled for $20 million, while 2 injured women received undisclosed payouts. Schlitterbahn demolished Verrückt in 2018, but the slide's German name, meaning insane, echoes a grim reminder of what happens when thrill-seeking trumps basic safety. The netting that was meant to save lives still appears in promotional photos, a haunting symbol of engineering arrogance that cost a child his life.